Okay, lesson 13. We're going to make an important jump today, making the switch. Last week, actually, we made the switch. We discussed asana, and basically we close off the physical part of yoga. We will continue to practice, of course, and increasing numbers of asanas and also increasing level. But that has been discussed, and then the lesson after that we talked about prana, and that is the start of the introduction towards pranayama, which is energy control. We will start with energy control in lesson 19, but actually we will start with it today in the form of the kriya exercises, which are a preparation for pranayama. But first, we have Ajna Chakra. Ajna Chakra, we have talked about already before. It was part of the extra subject in lesson 3, because it is so important and it cannot be emphasized and repeated often enough. Ajna Chakra is what distinguishes us from the animals. It is in Ajna Chakra that we, if we train the mind, can take control over our animal instincts and impulses. That is not easy, but yoga has a very clear, practical, systematic approach to that. It's one of the great goals of yoga, cultivation of Ajna Chakra. You remember there are 7 chakras. The lowest 3 chakras are the home of lower emotions and desires. Then the 2 chakras above that, the heart and the throat, are the home of what we call higher emotions and desires. Then there is Ajna Chakra, which is the mental body. It is where intellect is located. It is where willpower can manifest if we train willpower. Ajna Chakra is important in the sense that if you understand how it works, you use Ajna Chakra to overrule undesirable activity in lower chakras. If you see in the first paragraph, I think there is the mention that all the other chakras lie within Ajna Chakra. You know that symbolically they are along the spine, or not symbolically, physically, those wheels of energy, those balls of energy are located across the spine, but symbolically they are located within Ajna Chakra. And that symbolism means that the outer ball of energy can control and dominate the balls that lie within. So the lower chakras are locations where they have various different functions. We start with Ajna Chakra because of its importance, but when we have finished this subject, we actually start with the chakra at the bottom and then go upwards. So in the second session you will see which many functions basically each chakra has. It totally determines who we are, and more importantly, how we act, react, and behave in daily life. Then the lower chakras are all emotions and desires, divided between lower and higher emotions and desires. It is especially the lower emotions and desires that are responsible for our conflicts, for our suffering and misery. So if you understand that, and understand that through mind control you can overrule what happens in the lower chakras by deciding not to go along with the lower emotion, by deciding that it is undesirable and you're not going to act or react in that way you can avoid a lot of misery and conflict, because conflict always occurs as a result of an impulse. We act or react in a certain way that ruffles feathers, and a conflict is born. Ajna Chakra is the location of rational thought if it is conditioned. I mentioned before that there is big lumps of the brain and there are small lumps of the brain. People who have no conditioning of the big lumps of the brain, which is where rational thought is located, they are often intuitively very strong because their energy is all in the small lumps of the brain. But the fact that there is no intellect to speak of means that they don't understand what they intuit. They don't understand what they perceive on a subtle level. But they are very connected with the natural world. They're very connected with what we call the world of spirit, which is energy. But they cannot rationalize it. And because of that, those people are full of superstition. Superstition is fear of the unknown, or fear of that what you cannot understand, what you cannot explain. The other side of the coin is the modern human being that is intellectually highly developed. All the energy is in the big lumps of the brain, but that leaves very little energy for the functioning of the small lumps of the brain. We have no intuition anymore. We have no reception anymore of what is happening in the world of spirit and energies. But we are rationally very strongly developed. Among modern people with a strong intellect, you don't see superstition anymore. We have become too rational for that. What we try to achieve, of course, is a balance between the big lump and the small lump of the brain, the functioning of the two. Then you have the ideal situation. What you have then is a refined sense, intuition of what is happening around you, in nature, in people, in yourself. But you have the rational capacity to understand it. Not only that, go ahead, Beatrice, no problem. Beside that, the lower chakras, just like the crown chakra, are a constant source of information. Fear, desire, ambition. There are all kinds of energies whirling in those lower chakras, depending on the situation that we find ourselves in. They will be activated. And if we function subconsciously, which is how human beings function, the majority, even highly educated people have a tendency to function subconsciously. As long as we function subconsciously, we will always act and react based on circumstances. It is the circumstances that determine our happiness, our well-being. It is the circumstances that determine how we act and react, our impulses. Until we become aware of it, and within Ajna Chakra, we observe what is happening there below in those lower chakras, and we are aware of the emotion that leads to an action or a reaction. And we say, I see where this is going. It's not good if I act upon this impulse. It's going to lead to conflict. So let's not do that. Let's try to control that instinct, that emotion, and avoid a lot of trouble. So Ajna Chakra is, in that respect, the most important chakra. But that does not mean that the other chakras are not important. But the goal of yoga is in fact the development, the manifestation of the intellect in Ajna Chakra, with everything else that develops around it. The center point of everything must be the development of Ajna Chakra. Because without that, you get lost. Or even many beginning yoga practitioners notice that their misery actually increases at first, because they do not understand what is happening, while they are becoming increasingly conscious and also more sensitive. But without understanding that in the beginning stages, in the early stages, it actually leads to an increase of our suffering and misery. But that is a temporary stage that we call one of the diseases of the disciple. So if that happens to you, remember that it is temporary, and if it is overwhelming, you drop me an email and I will try to guide you through it. The most desirable condition in Ajna Chakra is, of course, sattva. That applies to everything else. Our overall condition, when sattvic, determines how we function, and in sattva that is the most optimal. Ajna Chakra in sattva expresses itself as observation. Observation, think about daydreaming. You know daydreaming? Do you remember how it felt when you were a child, when you were daydreaming? Those are your happiest moments if you remember clearly. Why? You're totally disconnected from the sense of I-ness. You're buzzing out, you're in a zone, in a trance, and you have a comprehension of things that you cannot mentalize. People who do not understand that, parents, teachers who do not understand that, they punish students or kids that are daydreaming because they think they are doing nothing. While the opposite is actually true. A person who daydreams is like a sponge, like a dry sponge absorbing vibrations, energies, connecting dots, while obviously doing nothing. You actually perform incredible tasks. Contemplation comes to mind here. It is in that condition that revolutionary inventions are found, are created. It is in that condition that scientific insights are established. Deep, complicated scientific insights. Think about Einstein, for example, who more than 100 years ago had such incredible insights that modern day scientists still are trying to understand certain of his theories that nobody yet can grasp. Most of his work has been relatively well understood, but there are still things insights that he came up with that modern day scientists are still scratching their head over what he actually meant there. And on another note, there are also still theories that with our modern technology are being proven to be true. Things that he presented the world that could not be verified 100 or more years later are being proven to be true with our modern technology. So think intuition, think clairvoyance. You understand clairvoyance? When we think about clairvoyance, we think about people who can predict the future and have a clear picture of what is going to happen 30 years later or so. That is not exactly clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is a very refined ability. You have dreams, or you have a feeling, a sentiment that gives you an idea, but you have to yourself, you have to complete the picture by trying to construct what you're actually really feeling. So it's not that simple. It's not that suddenly you have a vision of something that's going to happen 80 years later or so. But clairvoyance is something that already happens when you're not even realizing that you have that capacity. In Rajas, which is a domination of Shakti energy, the chakra expresses itself in creation of thought and thought control. In Rajas in Ajna Chakra is, for example, when you work or when you study and you're focused on what you're doing. How do you feel? It feels good. It gives a certain sense of exhilaration when you are focusing like that. And people kind of like that. Not only that, they prefer that condition, and therefore they don't want to stop focusing. And that often leads to addictions, like becoming a workaholic. Because the moment that you stop focusing, Rajas will be replaced by Tamas. Shiva starts to dominate for you to recover. But in a Shiva dominating condition, uncontrolled thought production, restlessness and negativity occur. So people who are relatively in a tamas condition, they have a tendency to be gloomy. A vicious cycle of negative thought occurs. Not because you are negative or because you are sick. No, it's all a matter of energy. If you change the energy, the gloominess or even depression will disappear. It is the reason why many therapies include physical activity, like walking in nature, cycling, working in the garden, volunteering, all these kind of physical activities that lead to a generation of Shakti energy. And as a result, your negative perception is replaced by a more positive outlook. You know that in yoga everything is about energy? I had a strange habit in school when we had exams. We usually had all exams concentrated in 1 week, and then in that week you only had exams, no other classes. Then generally when you look around you see people frantically trying to cram all the theories inside their head. So I would arrive at school, go to the canteen and get a cup of tea and simply sit in the windowsill until it's time to start the exam. No books with me, no notebooks, just staring outside, people passing by, birds flying through the air. But other students have their books with them and nervously try to memorize more just before the start of the exam, and they black out. The moment that they sit behind their desk, and they start with question number 1, they black out. You know what causes the blackout? Is the energy is being blocked. Because the energy is blocked, Ajna Chakra doesn't work. The memory doesn't work. You know what I did? I didn't know at that time theoretically how it worked. In hindsight, I understand that what I did may to other people have appeared to be lazy or unmotivated, but in fact I kept my energy circulating by not being worried or stressed or nervous about the exam to come. Of course I felt a certain nervousness, which is healthy, it makes you perform better, but not to the point that it blocked my energy. And you know the benefit of that is, even when confronted with a question that you don't know the answer to, you have the creativity to give an answer that at least addresses the essence of the question. And for that you always get extra points. Not a perfect score, you always get some points for that. Because the teacher that sees that maybe the answer is not 100% correct, but you know what it is about. That's what happens if you just relax. And you know, your study, you should have done that in the 2 or 3 months leading up to the exam week, and not in the last half hour trying to cram everything into your brain. It just doesn't work. It blocks the energy and you fail. You black out. You paralyze. So what you have there is in fact surrender. Surrender, or Ishvara Pranidhana, which literally means keep the energy flowing, keep the prana flowing. Just accept that you are dealing with an important aspect of your study. You must have a good score to pass or go to the next level. But realize that if you overdo it in your worry, that you basically set yourself up for what you dread the most, what you fear the most, which is failure. It is clear that that meditation here is the key to developing Ajna Chakra. Our modern education system is based not on meditation, but on theory, reading, studying. Yoga is a kind of predecessor? Predecessor? Is that the right word?
I don't know where you're going, so keep going.
Yoga came before education.
Yes.
Yeah? Yoga came long before education. It was the way to educate before education became the way, formalized the way that it is these days. But the way that yoga develops Ajna Chakra is to develop Ajna Chakra without jamming the hard disk with loads of data that you actually don't need. And that makes you a natural scientist. Because your hard disk has very few data, it works very rapidly. And it has loads of capacity to absorb. While modern education requires that we read and memorize lots of things that we're actually not really interested in. And that is like downloading too many apps into your hard disk, too many programs into your hard disk, too much data into your hard disk, and then your computer becomes very slow, very sluggish. So modern education is very important. It does. There are teachers who are very negative about it, yoga teachers, because they see that developing Ajna Chakra without all that burdening seems to be a better proposition. But there is a reason why governments around the world have made education compulsory. From a young age up until the age of 18, you must attend school, even to the point that if you don't go to school, your parents can be fined for not making sure that you attend class until the age of, it's different in different countries, some countries until 16, some countries up until 18. But the reason why it is compulsory is because it determines how society functions. It cultivates behavior that governments need to keep order in the country. Not only that, it prepares you to be an active, participating citizen that contributes to the economy. But very important aspect of modern education is it does do what yoga does. It helps us to control, to some point at least, lower emotions and desires. But it doesn't do that in a very different way than yoga does, because modern education does not teach you to be conscious and then use Ajna Chakra to control it. It just teaches you to oppress lower emotions and desires. And that is a reason why many people in modern day society have mental or psychological problems. And one of the biggest one of those is, of course, depression. Good, I added an extra file, 2 extra files. One is a chakra chart, which you can just keep for yourself. It has the 7 chakras there. But I'd like to draw your attention to Pregnant Through Prayer. Pregnant Through Prayer is an article that many years ago I came across in a Dutch medical magazine. And I was immediately struck by the cynicism with which it was written. I translated it from Dutch into English, and I tried to keep it as genuine as possible so you can feel that cynicism yourself. It already starts in the first paragraph or the introduction, the subtitle. Research in Korea suggests that prayer is very conducive for fertility. And who knows for what else? Ha ha. What is this about? It's about the power of Ajna Chakra and how that power, in a subtle form, is in fact capable to reach around the globe, around the world, and influence other people. Now, that sounds a little bit strange or far-fetched, but try to compare this with something that must have happened in your life on a regular basis. You think about a person, and suddenly the phone rings, you pick up the phone, hey, it's you. I was just thinking about you, and actually I was about to dial your number. And you say, what a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. What happened is, on a very subtle level that you cannot be aware of, either you were thinking of that person picked up the phone because that person received your vibration, picked up the phone and dialed your number, or the opposite. That person thinks about you, picks up the phone, and you, in the meantime, have picked up that vibration, start thinking about that person, and before you can actually grab the phone, it rings, and it is actually that person. So that connection is there. It's something that happens on a very subtle level, even with our consciousness as yogis, you're not aware of it. But it does explain how it works. This is an experiment done to this phenomenon. How we can actually choose to connect with other people. Now, what did they do? It's a research that was done in Korea. They took 199 women at the Cha Hospital, which is famous for IVF treatment in particular. And they divided this group into two. One group was the placebo group. The other group, they asked people to pray for them in 3 layers thick. So they asked a group of Christians in the US, so that's far away across the ocean, the Pacific, to pray for this group of women. Then they asked a group of Christians in Canada to support the praying US Christians with their prayer, and another group in Australia to support the first 2 groups. It all started as a joke. They set themselves up. They really thought, we are going to disprove that this is even possible. What happened is, 50% of the group for whom was prayed actually became pregnant. The placebo group, only 25% became pregnant. That is such a huge difference that they couldn't explain it away anymore. That is why, again, it ends in a very cynical way. So Lobo cum Suis hesitated for a long time to make their findings public. You know why they hesitated to make it public? They are afraid to lose their reputation with something laughable like this, because you cannot scientifically concretely prove that it worked. Although the numbers, the percentages are clear. That is 100% difference that you see there. So they hesitated for a long time to make their findings public, but they finally published their research in the September issue of the Journal of Reproductive Medicine with the pressing request, and there the cynicism starts again, with the pressing request to their colleagues to find another explanation to the statistics resulting from the research. Themselves, they had already reorganized the data again and again to come to another conclusion, but to no avail. Now, another cynical jab. We are waiting now for a similar research into cross fingers. For every little bit of help is useful. For me, for us as yogis, no doubt, there's no need to be cynical at all. Because this is the power of Ajna Chakra. This is the power of thought. When you think of people, they feel you, even across the globe, on the other side of the earth. Not consciously, but it may happen that while you think of them, they spontaneously start thinking of you. And it is in this way also that you, for example, feel when a family member is in distress. I have dreams where we dream all night long, right? I never remember when I wake up what my dreams were about. But once in a while, I have a dream that is, when I wake up, very clear. I remember very clearly the details. I remember very clearly the people that were involved. In the beginning, I didn't understand. The very first time that I had such a dream was in 1996 when I was in Korea, and my brother appeared in my dream driving a car on icy roads, and he crashed his car into a tree. And he died in that dream. So when I came back home after 2 weeks, 3 weeks in Korea, 2 weeks after the dream, they picked me up at the airport and they said, "Do you know what happened to your brother?" So I said, "Did he have an accident?" They said, "Yes." But he was standing there, so he hadn't died. So the dream was real, and the accident happened 2 days after the dream became clear later. But the details were just a little bit different. That is because when you dream, you fill in the dream with your own conditioning. So that is a little bit deceptive. In my dream, he was chased by the police. And in his hurry to get away from the police, he crashed his car on black ice, slipping and crashing. But in reality, he was at work. He was driving a truck delivering bread to bread bakery franchises in the middle of the night, and black ice, and he crashed into a tree. And he didn't die. So details are different, but the dream very clearly. So that was the first time. It was very, very upsetting. But the second time, I had a dream about one of my younger twin sisters. And in that dream, she was actually raped by a sports instructor. And I contacted her, and first she denied it, and then she kind of confessed that she had a very short affair with a sports instructor. So again, details different, but the vibration was there. And she concluded, "Yeah, but we only kissed." Which I know, of course, is not true. Then recently, it happens only, it's a space in between those dreams, often years. Recently, I had 2 days in a row, I had a dream about a former neighbor with whom I'm not in contact anymore, but my sisters are. And there were no details that I was aware of in that dream, but her image was very clear, and it was upsetting 2 days in a row. So I wrote to my sister email or WhatsApp. I said, "Hey, contact our former neighbor. I'm pretty sure something is going on with her, something bad." And what do you say? She contacted, and it appeared that at that very moment her husband was in a coma because of he got infected with corona. It got so bad that he ended up in a coma. He came out of it, but she was, of course, if that is your partner, it's very upsetting, desperate times. And apparently I received that vibration. But that is Ajna Chakra. This means for us as yogis, we have a responsibility what we think. We are healers, not killers. But you now realize that not only do you kill with a gun or with a knife, you can harm people with thought as well. Have you ever heard of voodoo? Voodoo is black magic. You take a puppet and you stick needles in the puppet to harm another person, a person with whom you have scores to settle or so. Your thought of other people affects them on a subtle level. To be sure, on a subtle level, but it does affect people. This whole experiment shows that it works. the dreams that you probably have yourself but maybe were not aware of yet. The fact that you think of somebody and the phone rings and you think it is a coincidence, it is not. It just shows that it's actually quite powerful vibration that comes from the mind activity that we need to use more and more, of course, for positive purposes. It means that we have to be mindful of how we think. And that when thinking too much negative thoughts, even if that person is deserving, that we remember the yamas, for example, non-violence, most important of all. Because violence is not only physical, it can be very, very subtle, just by a harmful thought. Okay, well, Ajna Chakra has been discussed in several classes already. I do not have so much more to add to this. It will be much more interesting to look at the other chakras after this. Questions? Yes?
It's a practical question. At the moment, I'm doing a lot of study. So I find myself like physically inactive for quite long periods, but mentally very active. I guess my habit is to, when I finish my studies, to get up and move around.
Yeah.
And move my body, go for a walk or something like that. I did that yesterday and I ended up hurting myself.
Hurting?
What you were saying just now about the, you're actually in a raja state when you're concentrating. So doing something else that puts you in a raja state as well straight afterwards, I guess you need a period in tamas to recover, right? So what's the best thing to do after a long period of concentration?
I think movement is appropriate.
Okay.
Because the rajas that you generated is in Ajna Chakra. That's mental. And by integrating some movement on a fairly regular interval while you are mentally so busy, you maintain some balance between the physical and the mental activity. I don't think that is a bad thing. I do not think also that you have to let the raja settle down mentally before you actually start becoming physically active, because I think there is no relation there.
Some different bodies.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did you hurt yourself?
I just
physically?
Yeah.
Yeah. The sprain.
Just walking too hard up a mountain.
Okay. You overdone it.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But that perhaps interspersing with movement at regular intervals will be better. In extremes.
On another note, it can just be caused by doing too much in one time, or too suddenly. If you haven't made such an intense long climbing is very intense physically, then the condition is just not allowing you to do something like that so much in one time. Then, but not related to Ajna Chakra or Rajas in Ajna Chakra. I think it's not. It could be, but if you have some insight on that yourself, I'd like to hear that.
No, I understand your answers helped me make the distinction, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be rajas in one level of being and not in other levels.
Yeah, that is what explains, for example, that people who are only mentally active, like students, that they physically deteriorate because their mind is buzzing with rajas, but their body is totally tamas, and quickly deteriorating. That's why they say healthy mind in a healthy body. Physical and mental health do go together. Okay, let's have a short break. We have the introduction of the kleshas also. Go ahead.
It's a really weird, simple one. In your notes, you mentioned Ajna Chakra has 98 petals.
Yep.
It's quite often depicted with 2.
Yep. It's depicted with 2 when symbolically it's that has something to do with angels. They have.
Oh, that was a bit about the wings, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you look at the chakra chart, we have one here. It's not complete. No, it doesn't show any petals. But if you look at the chakras, they increase in number of petals from the bottom up. The Muladhara has 4, then 8, then 16, and crown chakra is the chakra with 1,000 petals after the 98 of Ajna chakra. Okay, let's have a short break.